There's a couple things are changing in Previs right now. Historically, Previs's most valuable tool was to be technical, to let us know what the lenses were, what we had to dress, what we had to build to create a camera shot. And that was sort of its inception. There was no other way to really describe that other than to see it and pull away from that some objective data, some metadata from the Previs, and then bring that to the set. Then over the last 7 or 8 years, it became this very creative tool. And that was good, except then it became a presentational tool. So suddenly Previs is being shown to the studio, in a virtual theater environment, with fully mixed score and recorded voices. And you go, well, what are we doing here? This doesn't make any sense. So a lot of people I know, myself included, have encouraged Previs to kind of wind the clock back a bit and become a little bit more technical and a little bit more limited to its application, where you need to understand exactly the technical requirements before you go attempt a shot. Parallel to that, though, other tools are coming in to help directors really see what they're doing before they make it. And ILM, for instance, has developed some really sophisticated sort of tools for living and existing in an environment, a CG environment, before you begin making a movie there. Those are really valuable. So there's ways of transporting directors now to worlds and environments, particularly obviously in heavily visual effects movies, where they can get a grasp of it before they ever have to sort of begin creating shots. Secondly, in a much more simpler way, the animation pipelines, which have been in existence for years, of just simply drawing pictures, cutting the pictures, and then putting those up in a sort of like a reel format. That's become a very increasingly valuable tool too, because so much of our movies now are filled with these long periods of CG animation, 6-7 minute periods of that. And the best way to really arrive at that is to sort of go back to old-fashioned, what they were even before Previs, animation animatic tools. I think we're training away from that, because I think there is there is a more obvious appreciation of what happens on a set, and what happens when actors get together, and what happens when a director has a free-form camera. And I think a lot of the advances that we're seeing right now are in technologies that are allowing that freedom and that sort of sense of spirit that probably goes back to just theater to be present in increasingly complicated environments. You get into a massive visual effects environment full of mocap actors and virtual sets, and you try and find a way, how can we get a director to just actually be able to direct with actors so that they can feel the rhythms of a scene and begin to understand the emotional reality of a scene and begin to act and interact and react to actors instead of having to be burdened down by what is, as I say, increasingly complicated sets. So the Lego movie, that is a hard one. We talk about that all the time. We were really shocked. And we won a BAFTA and we won a bunch of other awards, but that felt like a snub, and it felt like a snub to us from possibly a executive board within that branch that viewed the movie maybe incorrectly and thought it was a product placement movie, thought it was an advertisement for Lego, which leads me to believe maybe they never saw it because it's so obviously not that. It lampoons that at every turn. And I think there was probably maybe some confusion about how we did it. Some thinking perhaps it was done with real plastic toys and really done in stop motion. I think there might have been some criticism or maybe some failure to appreciate the complexity of the facial rigs, because what we managed to get across emotionally with those rather simple faces with just some moving parts there, I thought it was extraordinary. I'm very proud of the movie. Everybody who worked on it, we're really proud of the movie. We're making another one. Maybe the next time around we'll get a better nod. We're thrilled with the accolades we got around the world, though. And, the Oscars are a big one, but it's not bad to get a BAFTA. First off, nobody sets out to make a bad film. Nobody sets out to make a mediocre film. I've never been in any meeting where someone said, let's just mail this one in. It'll be okay. The audience will buy it. Really, everybody begins thinking that the movie they make is going to be fantastic, and it's going to be a worthwhile venture, and that it's going to touch audiences in a way that they didn't expect. it gets more difficult after that moment, right? It becomes hard. I mean, there's the practical considerations that have an impact, and it's hard to gauge all of the practical things that come at you when making a movie at once, because it's like death by paper cuts. There's an actor availability issue. There's a location issue. There's script changes that came in really, really late. There's somebody, the director suddenly had a new idea, or a director just saw a movie that feels invades on what he's doing, now he wants to make a change. And you're rolling with these every day. And what's the hardest thing to do, and I don't know who can do that, is that at a certain point they accumulate all of these small things, small pressures and changes, and the movie begins to get off track. And you don't really know it. I don't think you can see it coming. And then you get to the place where now increasingly almost all movies end up in, which is you're in post-production and the movie's not quite what you'd hoped. And it's either doesn't feel like we delivered on the concept, or maybe it just looks terrible, or maybe whatever. There's a reason why, and then you go through the mode of repair. And we're increasingly, a lot of people say movies are made in post, but I think right now the post tools are so robust and they're so sophisticated, and the audience testing process is so sophisticated that post-production really is a very creative area right now. And I think we spend a lot of time, doing, it's not just as simple as reshoots, it's reshaping movies, it's redoing visual effects to better indicate a story. But the core question you're asking, like, why is it so hard? Why do movies end up? I don't know the right answer to that, other than to say no one sets out to do that. And I do think that it's a measure, you have to be honest with yourself, and that's a hard thing to be for anybody. Honest with yourself when something's not working, honest with yourself when an audience isn't really liking the movie, and then have the resources to really fix it. And I do think that there's some people that probably get to a point in a movie and go like, you know what, although they never had the conversation where they said it's good enough, they get to a place where, with a release date looming, they say, look, it's good enough. We just need to get an opening out of this film. There's a whole section at the bookstore dedicated to managing. I think probably managing people is going to be the same almost across any industry. In this one, they're unusually creative people. They're also people that are used to, in sort of a gypsy-like way, moving from project to project. And I think anybody in my position has to be smart about both those things. They have to know that that creative people you need to help find a way to get them to a place where there's sort of what's the word I'm looking for? It's a momentum that builds around a project, where the idea of it and its potential is so clear in everybody's mind. And when you can get to that place, and with the help of all the people around you too, directors and everybody, but when you as an executive can see that the project has got that, it's reached critical mass of focus and energy, you have to go, and you got to go fast. Because that's going to last only a certain amount of time. And then when it's over, you're going to be putting the pieces together again. And the analogy I use is that every time we make a movie, it's like we're all going to get on a beautiful luxury jetliner in Los Angeles, and we all sit down and they pour champagne and the plane takes off. But by the time we're getting to our destination, New York, we're burning the seats for fuel, and we're just looking for the nearest airport to land. And if you've had a good, clear idea at the beginning about what you're going to make, that process at the end is much easier. I think the other thing you do with creative people, in my opinion, is you want to make sure that you are playing to their aspirations creatively, right? It's not so you can't be prescriptive. You have to be descriptive of a problem, but try not to be prescriptive of the solution. And that's the most valuable thing you can do, is say, I still don't think that this is working, that this character makes sense, or that really looks like historic London. And that's all you can say, but it's so easy for me to follow that lineup and go, so here's what I think you should do. And I make that mistake all the time, but I know it's best when you sort of hold back a second and just say, I know your aspirations are to solve these problems. I just described the problem in a very respectful way, but now I'm going to be silent here. And that takes a little discipline on all of our parts, but in the end, I think that's how you drive creative people toward really remarkable solutions. I think FMX is really important to our industry. I mean, there's several levels. One, just forcing all these people to stop, pause, create a presentation, think about what they're doing, and then proudly present it is good for the business. It creates, listen, back to my goal is to get a competitive and innovative environment. This feeds that. People feel like they want to show up, they want to show off, and then they want to leave here and do something twice as cool next year. And I think that effect is felt by everybody here. But the second thing, and arguably the more important thing, is to underscore the community that exists in the visual effects business. I come here every year because I get 10 minutes, 20 minutes with a bunch of people, all of whom I rely on every year in a rather stressful environment. And I get to just look them in the eye a little bit, understand where they're going, what they're thinking, and again, what their aspirations are, what their hopes are for the new year, what they might be working on. And those bonds that you can forge at something like this, particularly for someone in my position, they have huge payoffs 8 months from now when we are in that stressful situation or in that creatively compromising situation. And I can look at the person and I know, like, we spent some time together, remember? Back in May there, we went out for beer or whatever, or we went to that presentation and saw something incredible. And I think those bonds are really hard to forge in this business. So any opportunity to have them, I'm going to jump on.